I want to preface this next story by saying that I am mostly digital when it comes to how I get my games. I'd say most of my games, probably 80% of them, I get through Steam, which is digital. I also have an iPhone and an iPad, and I play digital games on there. I've got a 3DS from Nintendo. Some of the games I get there are digital, some are cartridge. Now that depends on if it's a game that I think is appropriate for my son and we can share it. In that case, I will get a cartridge so that we can trade it back and forth. Other than that, I usually go digital unless it's a game that I just ask my wife to get me for Christmas or my birthday or whatever. In which case she would go to the store and buy it or buy it off Amazon so that I have something to unwrap. The same thing goes for our Wii U or our Xbox 360. Most of the games on there are digital unless we've decided that it was a game where we were going to give it to our son who likes to play video games, and then he can unwrap it. Because, you know, there's that experience of unwrapping things, which is cool. Whoops, I forgot to shut off my phone. Let me take care of that. Speaking of digital. So, I just want to preface this next story with that. Now, the story is that Gamestop CEO, his name is J. Paul Rines, he said today that he thinks disc-based games are going to be around forever. I'll actually read you the quote. He says, disc-based games will be around forever. The market has seen physical music sales down 50% from its peak, and physical movie sales... I wonder did I read that wrong? The market has seen physical music sales down 50% from its peak, and physical movie sales down 60%. From its peak. But even in a doomsday scenario, disc-based games will be around for a long time. I see a complementary business where we sell discs plus download like the current console mode. I think he means like you sell a disc and then DLC is sold digitally. That's what I think he means by that. He then goes on to say that virtual reality games will also likely follow this model. Okay, fair enough. That's this guy's opinion, but when I read this, I think, hold on a sec. If we went back in time to the 80s and we said to the CEOs of Electronics Boutique and Babbage's, who are both now out of business, I think they both were actually bought by GameStop, if I remember correctly. But if we went back in the day and we asked them, do you guys think cartridges are going anywhere? I bet both of them would have said, no, we'll always have cartridges. And that's because speculating about technology is a bad idea. It's just a bad idea. You can't speculate about technology that far out in advance to say digital games aren't, or not digital, but physical media for games is going to be around forever. So, I don't know. The quote's not really... It doesn't really mean much, especially coming from the CEO of GameStop. It's not a big surprise that this quote would come from a guy whose business depends on disc-based games to be sold, because I think most of GameStop's sales, most of their profit anyway, comes from the resale of used games. I think that's where they get most of their profit. I'm not positive. I haven't seen this anywhere. I just think that that's probably what happens. That's my gut feeling. So coming from a guy whose job it is to make sure that lots of discs get sold, it just seems really weird. It makes me think of a quote. I think I heard it on West Wing, and I had to look it up. It was originally by Upton Sinclair, who might have the coolest name ever. He said, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it." So right now, this guy's salary depends on selling physical media. It's difficult for him to say that physical media is going anywhere. So I think what I think is going to happen eventually, and I'm not saying anytime soon, but I am saying eventually, digital is going to kill these guys unless GameStop or any other physical media retailer diversifies, in which case they start selling other things, which if you walk into a GameStop, there's lots of other stuff around there that they're selling that's not actual games. Or they go all in selling stuff that appeals to gamers without selling the games. So maybe they say, you know what? We know with the writings on the wall, we need to walk away from the games business and do something else. Let's buy a company that specializes in making things that nerds like. Oh, wait, that actually happened. If I remember correctly, and this just occurred to me, so I didn't write it down, I think that GameStop bought ThinkGeek, the website. So this actually kind of makes a lot of sense. Now, let's play devil's advocate just a little bit. Let's talk about why discs would not go anywhere. All right, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, especially in the U.S., is terrible internet. You know, these games have huge, absolutely massive file sizes. At least right now they seem huge because terrible internet companies who make a profit off restricting how many internets, yes. They make a profit off how much bandwidth you are using, or by restricting that bandwidth and then getting you to pay them to stop restricting it, is these huge file sizes. They come right up against these bandwidth caps that the ISPs have, and that makes it really difficult for somebody who has to worry about bandwidth caps to be able to download all their games. Another reason why discs would probably be sticking around are collections. I've got a bookshelf full of movies. I don't have a bookshelf full of games anymore. Even when I was buying games, I usually threw the boxes away. I know some people are probably very angry with me for saying that, but then I had like a disc carrier that I had all my discs in alphabetically so I could flip through and find them. But movies, CDs, these things are still sold. I mean, hell, you can still go out and buy a record. You can buy a record. I mean, how long has it been since people actually bought records as like the main way to listen to music? I don't think that's happened in a really long time. But you can still go out and buy a vinyl record. Paper books, the Amazon, the Kindle has digital books. The iBookstore on iOS, the Google Play Bookstore. There's all these different places where you can easily buy books. But people still like paper books. My wife just went to a bookstore the other day to buy some books for her mom for presents because people like paper books. I don't like paper books, but a lot of people do. Another reason why digital games, or not digital games, I keep saying the wrong thing. Another reason why physical media or discs are going to be around for a really long time is untrustworthy companies. Companies like 2K Games comes to mind if you if you listened to my rant about BioShock. And consumer rights. When you look at these companies and there's very little consumer rights, there's nothing to protect people who buy something digitally and then can have that taken away from them, like happened with BioShock. There's nothing to protect people from that. That makes it a little harder for people to say, you know what, I'm going to go digital and get rid of all this physical stuff in my house. So it's a little tough for people to get that discs would go away. I can understand why people would say, I want to keep my discs, and you can have them when you pry them from my cold, dead hands. All right, so we played devil's advocate for a little bit. Let's talk about why I think that they would go. Moving parts are bad. If you look at a console, the area or the place where the biggest point of failure, I guess I would say, is the disc. That's the biggest point of failure. The disc can get scratched. That's bad. The moving parts inside the drive is probably going to be one of the first things to fail. And there's no other moving parts in the console unless they're using a hard drive instead of a solid state drive. Which makes me wonder, do the Xbox One and the PS4 use a solid state drive, or do they use an old-fashioned hard drive? I actually don't know off the top of my head, and I don't know about the Wii U either. I think the Wii U uses a solid-state drive, but I'm not positive. I only think that because the Wii U, like the deluxe version, only comes with 32 gigabytes. And that makes me think, okay, it's solid state, and they were going cheap. So, moving parts are bad. Once you get that drive out of there, and I'm not talking about this generation, I'm talking about next generation, or maybe even the generation after that. Once you get far enough out there, then you get the moving parts taken out of the system. Those moving parts are the points of failure. Then you're going to have a more reliable console. True, you'll still need a fan to keep the thing cool, much to, every audiophile's chagrin when you're trying to play a game and you can hear the fan kick on your console. That's irritating. It happens on my PC all the time. I'll be playing Guild Wars 2, and that thing it needs to cool my processor down. So you got to have fans. So you're never going to get completely rid of moving parts, or at least not anytime soon. Another reason why disc-based games are going to go away is people who play games, the older people who play games, they're the ones who want to keep the discs usually. I say that even though I group myself in with the people who are both older and don't care about discs. I don't care about discs. I don't trade in my games. I usually keep them and play them. Now, younger people, however, they're used to buying things digitally. They've been raised on the iPhone and the iPad. They've been raised on the Nintendo eShop. They've been buying things on Steam, and they really don't know as much about this disc-based system anymore. And as older gamers shuffle off this mortal coil, the number of people that insist that buying physical media is the only way to go, well, those people are going to dwindle. And it'll be more people who are buying only digitally. Another reason why these games on discs will probably go away is money. Money, money, money. Mr. Krabs, he's all about the money. The developer doesn't spend as much money pushing bits out to the internet as they would shipping discs out to retailers. Not only that, but I think that, like Nintendo, for example, I'll use them as an example. If they want to, you ever walk into a GameStop and you notice how small the Nintendo section is? It's not just because they don't have a whole bunch of games, because they don't. I can admit that. But it's probably also because they didn't want to spend as much money on the shelf space. Nintendo's always been very, very conservative. And I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that if you want a game to sell in GameStop, then the developer or the publisher or whoever, they got to pay GameStop to put it on their shelf in a prominent place. Like, that's one of the ways that GameStop makes money, is by making developers or publishers pay money to prominently display their game. If you don't have to do that because you've got your own digital shop someplace, then that's one more way to save money. If you don't have to press out your discs, that's another way to save money. If you don't have to put those discs on trucks and ships and boats, ships and boats are the same thing, and planes, that's more money that you can save. So in the future, I'm sure that physical media is going to go away. I don't think it's going to happen soon, but it will happen, I think. All right, so we looked at both sides of the coin. Let's think about what else could happen. Like GameStop, they want to keep their money. They want to keep making more of that money. How can they do that if the physical media goes away? One way is in this whole Toys to Life thing that sprang up over the past few years. You know, it started with Skylanders, and then Disney Infinity, and now Amiibo. Well, what if instead of selling discs, GameStop started selling these figures, and those figures had like a token or something, or a code where you bought the figure and you got the code, and then you could download the game with that code. So not only would this be good for GameStop, so they could continue to sell stuff, it's good for collectors, because collectors get all these cool figures. Like a lot of times you go out and you buy the collector's edition of a game, you're spending like $100. You get this cool figure or whatever. I don't really usually do that, but you get this cool figure that you can put on your shelf, and people like that. People like that stuff a lot. What if every game you could either you sell the collector's edition in GameStop, okay? And so you go to GameStop to pick up your collector's edition. It comes with this figure and a code that you can download the game. And basically what you're doing with the collector's edition is you're buying the figure. So, and then the other way to get the game is digitally, and you maybe get it cheaper because you're actually getting something more at GameStop. This would also give people a reason to want to go to GameStop to see the really cool figures and stuff like that. Something else that could happen is, he was talking about discs, but what if we replace the word discs with physical media? And I've kind of been using them interchangeably so far as I've talked about it. But what if instead of optical media like discs and Blu-rays and that kind of thing, what if we end up going back to cartridges? I mean, we kind of left cartridges behind because they were too small to hold the data. But now you can get like buckets of storage on a small card really, really cheaply. And maybe the age of the disc has passed us by. Maybe we can go back to cartridges now, which are more reliable and you don't have to worry so much about scratches. Another thing to think about is, what if discs are already gone and we just haven't realized it yet? Let me paint you a picture. Think about the 3.5 floppy disk that is used for the save icon on lots of programs. I don't remember when it happened, but a while back, Apple put out a computer that didn't have a 3.5 disk. And at the time, everybody was like, are you kidding me? How could you do that? We've got stuff saved on these disks. And Apple said, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You can buy this external one if you want. And everybody said, well, all right, I guess I can get the external one if I really want that. And then they bought their computer. And then they looked at the price of the external one and they said, I probably I'll buy one of those if I need it. I'm not going to buy it right away. And so people made the decision to wait on the disc. And then you fast forward a little while. And then you're like, you look around, and none of the computers around us anymore have a spot for a 3.5 disk drive, which is bizarre, because I was one of those people when I was younger who thought these things will be around forever because we'll need them. Well, first off, the files got too big for them, so we couldn't really use them. And the same thing is happening with optical media, again, in an Apple computer. You look at the newer MacBooks, they don't come with a slot where you can put a disc in anymore. I think that there's a model where you can put a disc in, but for the most part, if you want to put like a Blu-ray or a DVD into a MacBook, you have to buy an external thing. And this is the same thing happening all over again. We're going to get to a point where you're going to look around and you're going to be like, hey, wait a second. None of the computers around me have a CD drive. That's weird. But I guess I don't mind because I didn't notice it happening. And that's kind of what's going to happen. Think about this. We have iOS, we have Android, we have Steam. All of the consoles also have digital platforms. And say what you want about mobile gaming, but it does make up a significant piece of the gaming pie. So if we think about it, the percent of games that are released, that are also released in physical form in some way, that number might actually be a lot smaller than everybody thinks it is. I mean, most people, if you ask them, what does it look like when you buy a game? They would say, well, you go to GameStop, you buy a game, you open it, you get the disc out, you put it in the system. But if you look at the way that most people actually buy games, and I'm trying to include all games here, not just for consoles, but most games that are bought digitally, I think. I'll bet that the percentage of disc-based games is really small when you're comparing it to the overall gaming platform. Just some food for thought there. Anyway, what do you think? Do you think that J. Paul Rines is crazy by saying that discs are going to be around forever? Do you think I'm crazy for saying that they're going to go away? And how long do you think that they're going to be around for? Let me know.